Blood trickles onto Crestwood Academy's shiny gym floor as Sasha Reynolds towers over a crumpled body, fists tight, chest heaving. Everyone thought the shy new black girl would shatter under Victoria Hensley's cruel reign, but now phones waver in stunned hands, capturing a twist no one saw coming. This isn't the end, just the spark of a brutal war. Sasha's defiance will unravel a future drenched in chaos and consequences she can't escape. What happens when the hunted becomes the hunter? Before we dive in, tell us where you're watching from, and if you stand for justice against bullies, hit like and subscribe for more epic showdowns. Sasha Reynolds sat in a cold jail cell, her knee throbbing under the brace, her ribs aching from the gym fight, the concrete bench biting into her bruised skin. The live stream had worked, the crowd's phones catching Mr. Hensley's corruption before he smashed her proof. Hours later, keys jangled, a cop grunting, "You're out." She limped free, Marcus waiting, his truck rumbling, news blaring. Mr. Hensley arrested, his bribes exposed, Crestwood reeling. She'd thought it was over, her war won, justice hers. But as she sank into the seat, a letter slipped from her pocket, scrawled in red ink, Victoria's handwriting. "I'm in juvie now, but I've got friends, bigger ones, you'll pay." Sasha's breath caught, her victory flipping into a chill. She smirked, tossing it aside, her fists flexing, ready for the next round. They'd thought they'd silenced her, ended her fight. They didn't know what she'd face, what she'd become. Sasha Reynolds stepped off the creaky old bus, her scuffed sneakers crunching against the pristine gravel of Crestwood Academy's entrance. The air smelled of fresh-cut grass and money, a far cry from the diesel fumes and cracked sidewalks of Detroit. She adjusted her faded backpack, the straps digging into her shoulders, and squinted at the sprawling campus ahead. Towering oak trees lined the path, their branches framing a world of red brick buildings and kids in crisp uniforms that screamed privilege. She was here on a scholarship, a ticket out of her past, hoping to keep her head down and make it through, unnoticed. But the second her foot hit the ground, she felt the weight of 100 pairs of eyes sizing her up, their stares prickling her skin like needles. She was the only black face in a sea of pale ones, and that alone made her a target. The bus hissed as it pulled away, leaving her stranded in this alien territory. She tugged her hoodie tighter, the one with frayed cuffs she'd worn since 9th grade, and started walking toward the main hall. Whispers buzzed around her like flies, soft at first but growing bolder. "Look at her shoes," one voice snickered. "Did they bus her in from the projects?" Another chimed in. Sasha kept her gaze forward, jaw tight, pretending not to hear. She'd dealt with this before, moving from school to school after her mom lost job after job. Silence was her shield, a trick she'd learned to avoid trouble. But Crestwood wasn't like those other places. Here, the air crackled with something sharper, something meaner. She hadn't made it 10 steps when a shadow fell across her path. Victoria Hensley stood there, tall and poised, her blonde hair gleaming like spun gold under the morning sun. She wore a navy blazer with the school crest, her skirt hemmed just short enough to flaunt her status. Flanking her were 3 others, a pack of wolves in human skin. Jared, with his preppy sweater tied around his shoulders, smirked like he owned the world. Lila, her dark ponytail swinging, narrowed her eyes as if cataloging Sasha's every flaw. And Bryce, a mountain of muscle in a Letterman jacket, loomed behind them, cracking his knuckles with a grin that promised pain. Victoria tilted her head, lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her icy blue eyes. "Well, well," she said, her voice loud enough to draw a crowd. "What do we have here? Did the scholarship board scrape the bottom of the barrel this time?" A ripple of laughter spread through the gathering students, their phones already out, ready to capture whatever came next. Sasha stopped, her fingers tightening around her backpack straps until her knuckles ached. She could feel the heat rising in her chest, but she forced it down, keeping her face blank. Victoria stepped closer, her heels clicking on the pavement, and raked her gaze over Sasha's outfit. "Those sneakers look like they've been through a war zone," she said, her tone dripping with mock pity. "And that hoodie? Did you pull it out of a dumpster?" "Oh, right. You're probably used to that." More laughs erupted, sharp and cutting, slicing through the humid Georgia air. Sasha's pulse thumped in her ears, but she didn't flinch. She'd heard worse, survived worse. This was just noise. Jared leaned in, his breath smelling of mint gum. "What's your name, Charity Case?" he asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. Sasha stayed silent, her eyes flicking to the ground, then back up to meet Victoria's stare. Lila giggled, twirling a strand of hair. "She's too scared to talk. Figures, they always are." Bryce cracked his neck, stepping forward like he was itching to do more than talk. Victoria raised a hand, stopping him, her smile widening. "No need to rush," she said. "We've got all year to break her in. She'll learn her place soon enough." The crowd murmured, some nodding, others shifting uncomfortably, but no one dared speak up. Victoria ruled this school, her family's name etched into the donor plaques lining the halls. She was untouchable, and she knew it. Sasha took a slow breath, her mind racing. She wanted to disappear, to melt into the background like she always had. But something about Victoria's smugness, the way she wielded her power like a blade, made Sasha's blood simmer. She'd promised her uncle she'd stay out of trouble, focus on her grades, get out of this hellhole with a diploma in hand. Fighting wasn't an option, not yet. So she kept her mouth shut, her body still, letting the insults roll off her like water. Victoria's crew circled her now, a pack closing in on prey. "What's wrong?" Lila taunted, her voice high and grating. "Don't they teach you how to speak where you're from?" Jared chimed in. "Maybe she's just slow. You know how it is with her kind." The words hit harder than Sasha expected, a jab at her skin, her roots, everything she couldn't change. Her fingers twitched, itching to curl into fists, but she locked them in place. She'd spent years in her uncle's gym, learning to channel anger into precision, to turn chaos into control. She could drop Jared with one move, snap Lila's taunts with a twist of her wrist. But not here. Not now. She had to play smart. The crowd was growing, their whispers turning into a hum of anticipation. Victoria fed off it, her eyes glinting with delight. She reached into her designer bag, pulled out a styrofoam cup of coffee, and held it up like a trophy. "You look thirsty," she said, her voice syrupy sweet. "Let me help you out." Before Sasha could react, Victoria tipped the cup, splashing lukewarm coffee across Sasha's chest. The dark liquid soaked into her hoodie, dripping onto her jeans, staining the only jacket she owned. The crowd erupted, hoots and cheers bouncing off the brick walls. Sasha froze, the bitter smell filling her nose, her skin prickling under the wet fabric. Victoria stepped back, hands on her hips, grinning like she'd just won a prize. "Oops," she said, her tone mocking. "Guess I'm clumsy today. Better get used to it, new girl." Jared laughed, slapping Bryce's shoulder. "She looks better now, don't you think?" Lila snapped a photo, her phone flashing. "Perfect for the group chat," she said, already typing. Sasha's vision blurred for a split second, rage clawing up her throat. She could hear her uncle's voice in her head. "Don't let them see you break." She forced her breathing to steady, her hands unclenching one finger at a time. The coffee dripped onto the pavement, pooling around her sneakers, but she didn't move. She lifted her head, meeting Victoria's gaze with eyes that burned like embers. No tears, no shouts, just a quiet fire that made Victoria's smirk falter for half a heartbeat. Sasha reached into her bag, pulled out a crumpled napkin, and wiped the stain slowly, deliberately, never breaking eye contact. The crowd hushed, sensing something off, something they couldn't name. Victoria recovered fast, tossing her hair with a scoff. "What's the matter? Too proud to cry?" she asked, her voice sharp now, edged with irritation. Sasha didn't answer. She folded the napkin, tucked it back into her bag, and adjusted her straps. The silence stretched, thick and heavy, until Bryce broke it with a grunt. "She's boring," he said, cracking his knuckles again. "Let's go. She's not worth it." Victoria didn't move at first, her lips pressing into a thin line. She'd expected a reaction, a crack in Sasha's armor, but got nothing. It gnawed at her, a splinter under her perfect nails. Fine, she said finally, turning on her heel. But this isn't over. Welcome to Crestwood, trash. The clique sauntered off, the crowd parting like water, their laughter fading into the hum of the morning. Sasha stood alone, the coffee still clinging to her clothes, the whispers still buzzing in her ears. She could feel the weight of their stares, the judgment, the hate. This wasn't just about her hoodie or her sneakers. It was her skin, her presence, the audacity of existing in their world. She'd wanted to blend in, to survive this place, unnoticed, but Victoria had other plans. Sasha's calm wasn't weakness, though. It was a dam holding back a flood, one she'd trained to control since she was 12, sparring in her uncle's sweaty gym. She'd faced bigger monsters than Victoria Hensley, but as she walked toward the main hall, her soaked jacket sticking to her chest, she knew this was only the first punch. Victoria thought she'd picked an easy mark. She had no idea what she'd just unleashed. Sasha Reynolds slid into her seat at the back of the history classroom, her damp hoodie still clinging to her skin from Victoria's coffee stunt earlier. The room smelled of old books and chalk dust, a faint hum of air conditioning buzzing overhead. She kept her head low, hoping to vanish into the rows of Crestwood Academy's polished desks, but the whispers followed her like a shadow. Eyes darted her way, quick and cutting, as if she were a puzzle they couldn't solve. Why was she here? How did she sneak into their perfect world? She pulled out her notebook, its edges frayed from years of use, and tried to focus on the lesson. But trouble didn't wait long to find her. Victoria Hensley strutted in, her navy blazer pristine, her clique trailing like loyal dogs. Jared plopped into a seat nearby, tossing his backpack with a thud. Lila perched on a desk, smirking as she scrolled through her phone. Bryce loomed near the door, his bulk blocking the light. Victoria didn't sit right away. She stood, scanning, the room like a queen inspecting her court, until her gaze locked on Sasha. A slow, wicked smile spread across her face. "Oh, look," she said, loud enough for the whole class to hear. "The charity case made it to second period. Did you borrow that notebook from a thrift store too?" Laughter rippled through the room, sharp and eager, feeding off Victoria's every word. Sasha didn't look up. She scratched her pen against the paper, doodling a jagged line, her jaw tight. She'd dealt with girls like Victoria before, all flash and venom, but this felt different. Deeper, meaner. The teacher, Mr. Grayson, a wiry man with thinning hair and a tie too tight, shuffled in, clutching a stack of papers. He glanced at Victoria, then at Sasha, his lips pursing like he'd tasted something sour. "Settle down," he muttered, but his eyes lingered on Sasha a beat too long. She knew that look. It wasn't curiosity, it was suspicion. She'd seen it in every new school, every new town. Being black in a place like this came with a spotlight she couldn't shake. Class started, and Mr. Grayson droned on about the Civil War, his voice a monotone buzz. Sasha scribbled notes, trying to block out the snickers still floating her way. Then Victoria raised her hand, her bracelets jangling like a warning bell. "Mr. Grayson," she said, her tone sweet as poison, "I can't find my pen. I think someone took it." Her eyes slid to Sasha, gleaming with intent. The room went still, every head turning. Mr. Grayson frowned, adjusting his glasses. "That's a serious accusation, Victoria. Do you know who?" She didn't hesitate. "Her," she said, pointing at Sasha. "The new girl. She's got sticky fingers, I bet." A gasp rippled through the class, followed by stifled laughs. Sasha's pen froze mid-word, her pulse kicking up. She lifted, her head meeting Victoria's stare but kept her face blank. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice low and steady. Mr. Grayson crossed his arms, his expression hardening. "Miss Reynolds, empty your bag. Now." Sasha's stomach twisted, but she complied, unzipping her backpack and dumping its contents onto the desk. A battered textbook, a granola bar, a cheap pencil case. No pen. The class watched, hungry for drama, but Victoria didn't blink. "Check her pockets," she said, her voice sharp now. "She's hiding it." Mr. Grayson hesitated, then nodded. "Go on, Miss Reynolds." Sasha stood, her movement slow, and turned out her hoodie pockets. Nothing but lint. The teacher's face flushed, but instead of backing off, he doubled down. "This is a prestigious school," he said, his tone clipped. "We don't tolerate thieves. Apologize to Miss Hensley and we'll let it slide this time." Sasha's chest burned, the unfairness searing through her. She hadn't done a damn thing, but she knew how this game worked. Refuse, and it'd get worse. "Sorry," she said, her voice flat, her eyes locked on Victoria's triumphant grin. The class erupted, hoots and jeers bouncing off the walls. "That's right," Jared called. "Know your place." Sasha sat, her hands trembling slightly as she shoved her stuff back into her bag. Victoria leaned back, satisfied, but something flickered in her eyes. Sasha's calm didn't sit right. It wasn't the groveling she'd expected. What was this? Girl hiding? The bell rang and Sasha slipped out, her mind racing. She dodged one bullet, but the war was just starting. Lunch came next, and she braced herself as she stepped into the cafeteria, a cavernous room with long tables and chattering voices. She grabbed a tray, keeping to the edges, aiming for a quiet corner. But Victoria wasn't done playing. Sasha had just set her tray down when a shadow loomed over her. Victoria stood there, flanked by her crew, her smile cold as ice. "You're in my spot," she said, her voice carrying across the room. Sasha didn't move. "It's a free table," she said, keeping her tone even. Victoria's eyes narrowed, and before Sasha could blink, she tripped, her foot hooking Sasha's ankle. The tray flew, crashing to the floor with a clatter, mashed potatoes splattering across Sasha's sneakers. The cafeteria exploded with laughter, phones popping up to record. "Clumsy me," Victoria said, her giggle sharp as a blade. "You really need to watch where you're going." Sasha's blood roared in her ears, her fists clenching under the table. She could have grabbed Victoria's wrist, flipped her flat in 2 seconds. Her uncle's training flashed through her mind, every move etched into muscle memory. But she stayed still, rising slowly, her face a mask. Sauce dripped from her shoes, but she didn't wipe it off. She stepped over the mess, grabbed her bag, and walked toward the exit. The laughter chasing her, Victoria watched, her smirk fading. Why wasn't she crying? Why wasn't she begging? The silence gnawed at her, a challenge she couldn't ignore. Outside, Sasha leaned against a wall, breathing hard, the sting of humiliation mixing with rage. She'd survived the cafeteria, kept her cool. But as she headed to her dorm, Victoria's crew was waiting. Bryce cracked his knuckles, Jared grinned, and Lila filmed as they closed in. "Thought you could walk away?" Bryce growled, shoving her hard. Her back slammed into a locker, the metal rattling. Sasha twisted free, dodging Jared's grab, her movements fluid, too fast for them to catch. "What the hell?" Lila muttered, lowering her phone. Sasha didn't fight back, just slipped through their grip and bolted down the hall, her heart pounding. She made it to her room, locking the door, her breath ragged. They'd pushed her, humiliated her, and she'd held it, together. But as she sank onto her cot, she knew this wasn't the end. Victoria's eyes had burned with something dangerous, something personal. Sasha's calm wasn't weakness, it was a fuse waiting to ignite. She'd faced worse than this, trained for worse. But how long could she keep the fire inside? Hey, what do you think? Comment number 1 if you'd have snapped at Victoria already, or number 2 if you'd play it cool like Sasha. If you're rooting for her to fight back against these jerks, hit that like button and subscribe for the next part. Has anyone ever tried to break you like this? Drop your story below. So what's Victoria planning next to crush Sasha's spirit? Sasha Reynolds woke to the sound of her dorm room's thin walls vibrating with the hum of Crestwood Academy waking up. Her sneakers, still crusted with dried mashed potatoes from yesterday's cafeteria fiasco, sat by the door like a grim reminder. She rubbed her eyes, the ache in her back from the locker shove lingering, but she pushed it aside. She'd survived Victoria Hensley's first real strike, kept her cool when every nerve screamed to fight back. Today, she told herself, would be about laying low, dodging the spotlight. But as she slung her backpack over her shoulder and stepped into the hall, the air felt thick, charged with something new and ugly. She hadn't made it halfway to her first class when the whispers hit her like a wave. Kids clustered in the corridors, their heads bent over phones, their voices low but sharp. "Did you hear about the new girl?" one said, loud enough for Sasha to catch. "Scholarship trash from the ghetto," another sneered. She kept walking, her pulse ticking up, but the words followed her, growing bolder. "She doesn't belong here. Probably a thief." By the time she reached her locker, the murmurs had turned into a buzz she couldn't ignore. She spun the combination, her fingers steady, and yanked the door open. That's when she saw it. Red marker scrawled across the metal in jagged letters. "Go back to Detroit." Sasha's breath caught, her chest tightening like a fist had grabbed her lungs. She stared at the words, the hate dripping from every stroke, and felt the weight of every eye in the hall boring into her. This wasn't just Victoria's usual taunts. This was a message, a line drawn in blood-red ink. She slammed the locker shut, the bang echoing down the corridor, and turned to see Victoria leaning against a wall, her arms crossed, her lips curled in a smug little grin. Jared stood beside her, scrolling through his phone, while Lila twirled her ponytail, pretending not to watch. Bryce cracked his knuckles, his bulk a silent threat. Victoria didn't say a word, just tilted her head, letting the scene play out. Sasha's mind raced. She'd seen this before, the way rumors could spread like wildfire, turning people against you before you even got a chance to breathe. But this felt personal, calculated. She headed to her next class, English, keeping her head down. But the whispers chased her. "Heard she's only here because of pity," a girl muttered. "Her kind always cheats their way in," a boy added. Sasha slid into her seat, her skin prickling, and tried to focus on the teacher's lecture about Shakespeare. But then Victoria walked in, late, her heels clicking like a countdown. She dropped into a chair near the front, her voice cutting through the room. "Sorry I'm late, Mrs. Carter. Had to deal with some trash in the hall." The class snickered, their eyes flicking to Sasha. Mrs. Carter, a stern woman with gray streaks in her bun, didn't even glance up from her notes. "Just sit down, Victoria," she said, her tone flat. Sasha gripped her pencil, the wood creaking under her fingers. She could feel Victoria's game tightening around her, a noose she couldn't see. By lunch, the rumor had a name. Victoria had spread it like poison. Sasha's scholarship was charity for ghetto trash, a handout to make Crestwood look good. Kids stared at her in the cafeteria, some with pity, others with disgust. She grabbed her tray, aiming for her usual corner, when she saw the principal, Mr. Daniels, striding toward her, his face grim. "Miss Reynolds," he said, his voice clipped. "My office. Now." Sasha followed, her stomach sinking, the cafeteria's chatter fading behind her. Inside his office, a wood-paneled room with trophies lining the shelves, he didn't offer her a seat. "We've had complaints," he said, folding his arms. "Vandalism. Your locker. Some students say you're stirring trouble." Sasha's jaw dropped. "I didn't do that," she said, her voice steady but sharp. "Someone wrote on my locker. I'm the one getting targeted." Mr. Daniels raised an eyebrow, his lips thinning. "That's not what I hear. 2 boys confessed, said they did it because you provoked them. I'm suspending them for 3 days. But I'm warning you, Miss Reynolds, keep your nose clean." Sasha's heart lifted for a split second. "Justice, finally." She nodded, turning to leave, thinking she'd dodged the worst. But as she stepped into the hall, she saw Victoria's dad, Mr. Hensley, storming out of a side office, his suit crisp, his face red. He was a school board member, a man who threw money at Crestwood like it was his personal playground. He spotted Sasha, his eyes narrowing, and barked something at Mr. Daniels. Minutes later, the principal called her back. "Change of plans," he said, avoiding her gaze. "The suspensions are lifted. The boys say you lied about the vandalism to get them in trouble. Mr. Hensley agrees. You're on probation instead." Sasha's blood ran cold, her hands balling into fists. "That's not true," she said, her voice rising. "They wrote it. I didn't do anything." Mr. Daniels shrugged, already turning to his paperwork. "That's the decision. Don't push it or you're out." She stood there, stunned, the unfairness crashing over her like a tidal wave. Victoria's dad had flipped the script, turned her into the villain. She walked out, her head spinning, the hall blurring around her. She'd thought she'd won, thought the system might actually work for once. She was wrong. This place was rigged, and Victoria held the strings. By afternoon, the vandals were back, strutting through the courtyard like nothing had happened. Sasha saw them from a distance, their smirks wide, their confidence unshaken. She headed to her dorm, needing air, needing space, when a shout stopped, her cold. "Hey, trash!" one called. She turned, and a wad of crumpled paper hit her shoulder, then a soda can, then a handful of dirt. The boys laughed, closing in, their voices thick with venom. "Go back where you belong," the taller one sneered, his buzz cut glinting in the sun. "Nobody wants you here," the other added, his acne-scarred face twisting with hate. Sasha's pulse hammered, her training kicking in. She could take them, break their smug faces in seconds, but she held back, dodging the next throw, a half-eaten apple that splattered on the ground. They lunged, thinking she'd run, but Sasha moved like water, sidestepping the taller one's grab with a twist of her hips. He stumbled, cursing, while the other swung a wild punch. She ducked, her body low, her feet planted firm. "What the hell?" the buzz-cut kid spat, backing off as she straightened, her eyes locked on them, calm and deadly. They froze, confused, their bravado flickering. She didn't strike, didn't need to. Her stance said enough. Footsteps pounded behind her, and a security guard jogged up, his radio crackling. "Break it up," he yelled, glaring at Sasha, not the boys. "You causing trouble again, Reynolds?" The vandals smirked, slinking away, while Sasha stood, her ground, her breath steady. "I didn't start this," she said, her voice low, but the guard wasn't listening. "Back to your dorm," he snapped. "You're lucky I don't write you up." Sasha turned, her sneakers crunching on the dirt they'd thrown, her mind racing. She'd dodged their fists, shown them she wasn't prey, but the guard's bias stung worse than the attack. She'd thought she'd turned the tide, scared them off with a taste of her skill. But as she reached her room, she saw Victoria watching, from a window, her phone up, filming the whole thing. That grin was back, wider now, promising something darker. Sasha had escaped the trap, but Victoria wasn't done. She'd just lit a bigger fuse, and the explosion was coming. Sasha sank onto her cot, her hands trembling not from fear, but from the effort of holding back. She'd trained for years with her uncle, turning anger into power, chaos into control. Those boys didn't know how close they'd come to eating pavement. But this wasn't just about them anymore. It was Victoria, her dad, the whole damn school turning against her because of her skin, her story. She'd wanted to survive Crestwood quietly, but quiet wasn't an option. Victoria had set a trap, and Sasha had slipped through, but the next one would be worse. She could feel it in her bones. Sasha Reynolds trudged across Crestwood Academy's campus, her sneakers scuffing the manicured lawn, her hoodie still faintly stained from Victoria Hensley's coffee attack days ago. The air buzzed with excitement, students streaming toward the gymnasium for the first pep rally of the year. She'd planned to skip it, hole up in her dorm with a book, but the dean had sent a memo, attendance mandatory. Her probation meant no excuses, so she joined the crowd, keeping to the edges, her backpack slung low. The gym loomed ahead, its double doors flung wide, music thumping from inside. She slipped in, aiming for a back row seat, hoping to blend into the sea of navy blazers and preppy smiles. But Victoria had other plans. The gym was a riot of noise, bleachers packed with kids cheering as the football team jogged out, their jerseys gleaming under the lights. Sasha sank into her spot, her head down, but she could feel the weight of eyes on her, the whispers from yesterday's locker stunt still lingering. Victoria stood near the front, her blonde hair a beacon, her clique orbiting her like planets. Jared waved to the crowd, Lila snapped selfies, and Bryce flexed his arms, soaking up the applause. The Jumbotron flickered to life above the court, flashing team stats and sponsor ads. Sasha pulled her hood up, her fingers tracing the frayed hem, trying to tune out the chaos. Then the screen changed, and her world tilted. Her name blazed across, the Jumbotron in bold white letters, Sasha Reynolds. Below it, A photoshopped image of her face glared back, superimposed on a mugshot. Her skin darkened unnaturally, her eyes hollowed out. The caption underneath read, "Crestwood's criminal." A gasp rippled through the gym, followed by a roar of laughter, loud and vicious. Sasha's stomach dropped, her breath catching as every head swiveled toward her. "Thief!" Someone shouted. "Get her out!" Another yelled, the words laced with venom. Racial slurs sliced through the air, sharp and ugly. "Go back to the hood!" "She doesn't belong here!" The crowd fed off it, their voices rising, a tidal wave of hate crashing over her. Sasha's hands clenched into fists, her nails digging into her palms. She scanned the room, spotting Victoria at the center of it all, her lips curled in a triumphant smirk, her phone up, filming the chaos. This wasn't just a prank, it was a public execution designed to break her in front of everyone. The cheerleaders froze mid-routine, staring, while the football coach barked at the AV booth to cut the feed. But the damage was done. Sasha stood, her legs steady despite the tremor in her chest, and bolted for the exit, the laughter chasing her like a pack of dogs. She shoved through the doors, the humid Georgia air hitting her face, and kept moving, her sneakers pounding the pavement. She'd escaped the gym, dodged the worst of it, or so she thought. She made it to the edge of the parking lot, her breath ragged, when footsteps thundered behind her. She turned, and there they were, Victoria's crew, closing in fast. Bryce led the charge, his Letterman jacket flapping, his grin wide and feral. Jared flanked him, cracking his knuckles, while Lila trailed with her phone, the red recording light blinking. "Where you running to, trash?" Bryce called, his voice booming. Sasha's pulse spiked, her training kicking in, but she backed up, scanning for an out. "You didn't like our little show?" Jared taunted, stepping closer. "Thought you'd fit right in with that mugshot." Lila giggled, zooming in. "Perfect for the group chat," she said, her voice high and cruel. Sasha's back hit the rough brick of the gym wall, nowhere left to go. Bryce lunged, his meaty hands grabbing for her shoulders, pinning her hard against the bricks. The impact jolted her, pain flaring up her spine, but she didn't flinch. "Time to learn your place," he growled, his breath hot on her face. Sasha's eyes narrowed, her body coiling like a spring. She'd held back too long, let them push her too far. Her uncle's voice echoed in her head. "Use it when you have to." She twisted her hips, slipping under Bryce's arm, and drove, her elbow into his gut. He grunted, stumbling back, surprise flashing across his face. Jared swung next, a wild punch aimed at her jaw, but Sasha ducked, her movements fluid, honed from years in her uncle's gym. She grabbed his wrist, yanked him forward, and swept his legs out from under him. He hit the ground with a thud, cursing as dirt smeared his preppy sweater. Lila shrieked, dropping her phone, but Sasha didn't stop. Bryce roared, charging again, his fists swinging like hammers. She sidestepped, caught his arm, and twisted it behind his back, forcing him to his knees. "Stay down," she said, her voice low, steady, a warning carved in steel. He froze, panting, his bulk useless against her precision. Sasha released him, stepping back, her chest heaving. The parking lot went quiet, the only sound Lila's shaky breathing as she scrambled for her phone. Jared groaned, clutching his side while Bryce glared up at her, his pride bruised more than his body. Sasha's hands trembled, not from fear but from the rush of letting go. Just for a moment. She'd fought back, shown them she wasn't prey, and it felt good. Too good. She turned to walk away, thinking she'd turned the tide, put a dent in their smug armor. But as she rounded the corner, she didn't see Lila's screen, the video already uploading, the red light still glowing. By dinner, the clip was everywhere. Sasha sat in her dorm, her door locked, when her cheap phone buzzed with a text from a classmate she barely knew. "You're viral." She opened the school's group chat, her heart sinking as the video loaded. It wasn't the truth. Someone, probably Victoria, had edited it, cutting the ambush, starting with Sasha's elbow to Bryce's gut. She looked like the aggressor, a wild animal attacking out of nowhere. Comments flooded in. "She's dangerous. Kick her out. typical thug. The racial slurs piled up, each one a knife in her gut. She'd thought she'd won, scared them off with a taste of her strength. Instead, they'd flipped it, turned her victory into a noose. Sasha tossed her phone onto the cot, her head in her hands. The pep rally had been bad, the mugshot a public gut punch, but this was worse. They'd taken her fight, her survival, and twisted it into proof she didn't belong. She could hear her uncle now. They'll use anything against you. He'd been right. She'd slipped through their fists, but not their trap. Victoria's smirk flashed in her mind, that cold, calculating gleam. This wasn't over. Sasha had drawn blood, and Victoria wouldn't let it slide. She'd come back, harder, meaner, with something Sasha couldn't dodge so easily. The dorm walls felt tighter, the air heavier, as Sasha paced the tiny room. She'd trained for years, turned her body into a weapon to protect herself, not to play their games. But Crestwood wasn't Detroit. Here, the rules were stacked against her, the deck rigged with money and hate. She'd wanted to keep her head down, graduate, get out. But Victoria had made that impossible. The video was out there now, spreading, like a virus, and Sasha knew what came next. Retribution. She'd shown them a glimpse of what she could do, and they'd turned it against her. Her hands flexed, itching to hit something, but she forced them still. She'd escaped the ambush, but the real fight was just beginning. Sasha sank onto her cot, staring at the ceiling, her mind racing. She could feel the noose tightening, the school closing in. Victoria's crew wouldn't stop, not after she'd humiliated Bryce and Jared. And that video? It was a weapon, one she couldn't unmake. She'd thought she'd turned the tide, sent a message they'd respect. Instead, she'd lit a match in a room full of gasoline. Her uncle had taught her to fight smart, not just hard, but this wasn't a ring with rules. This was war, and Victoria held all the power. For now. Sasha's eyes hardened, her resolve steeling. She'd survived worse than this. Let them come. Sasha Reynolds sat in the stuffy detention room at Crestwood Academy, the clock ticking louder than it had any right to. The air smelled of mildew and regret, the walls a dull beige that matched her mood. Her sneakers tapped the linoleum floor, still flecked with dirt from the vandals' attack yesterday. That viral video from the pep rally ambush had landed her here, 3 days of after-school punishment for instigating violence, despite her being the one jumped. The dean had squinted at her through his wire-rimmed glasses, his voice clipped. "You're lucky it's not expulsion, Miss Reynolds. Mr. Hensley pushed for it, but we're giving you a chance." A chance. Right. She'd smirked at that, knowing. Victoria's dad had the school in his pocket, twisting her fight back into a crime. She hunched over the desk, her pencil scratching out math problems, the only sound besides the clock. The supervising teacher, Mrs. Polk, a woman with a perm too tight for her head, flipped through a magazine, ignoring her. Sasha's mind churned, replaying the video, her elbow slamming Bryce, Jared hitting the dirt, all edited to make her the monster. The comments still burned in her brain, racial slurs piling up like bricks, each one heavier than the last. She'd thought she'd scared them off, shown them she wasn't prey. Instead, they'd turned it against her, and now she was stuck here, caged while Victoria roamed free. Her hands itched to hit something, but she gripped the pencil tighter, forcing the anger down. The bell rang, snapping her out of it. Mrs. Polk waved her off without a glance, and Sasha grabbed her backpack, stepping into the dim hallway. The school felt emptier now, the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows, casting long shadows. She headed for her dorm, her steps quick, wanting nothing more than to crash on her cot and shut out the world. But as she rounded a corner, a chill crawled up her spine. The hall was too quiet, the air too still. She slowed, her ears straining, and then she saw it. A pile of ashes heaped outside her door, gray and smoldering, the faint smell of burnt paper stinging her nose. Sasha froze, her heart thudding. She knelt, her fingers brushing the pile, and found charred scraps of her textbooks, the edges curling black. A note sat on top, scrawled in red ink. "You're next." Her breath hitched, her eyes darting around the empty hall. This was Victoria's doing, no question. The pep rally, the ambush, the video, it wasn't enough. She wanted Sasha broken, erased. Sasha stood, her hands shaking, and unlocked her door, slipping inside to grab her phone. She dialed the dorm supervisor, her voice steady despite the fire in her chest. "Someone burned my books," she said. "Left a threat too." The supervisor sighed like it was her fault. "I'll report it, but don't expect much. Stay put." Sasha hung up, pacing the tiny room, her mind racing. She'd report it, get it on record, maybe even get Victoria's crew in trouble. She'd thought this could be a win, a crack in their armor. By morning, the dean called her in again, his office smelling of coffee and stale decisions. "We looked into it," Mr. Daniels said, his tone flat. "No witnesses, no proof. Sounds like a prank gone too far. You're on thin ice already, Miss Reynolds, so I'd let it go." Sasha's jaw tightened, her fists clenching in her lap. "A prank?" she said, her voice rising. "They burned my books, threatened me." He shrugged, adjusting his tie. "No evidence links it to anyone specific, but we're suspending you for 2 days. Fighting in that video stirred up tension. Calm it down." Sasha's blood boiled, the room spinning. Suspended. She'd been the victim, ambushed, targeted, and now this. She stood, her chair scraping the floor, and stormed out, the dean's voice fading behind her. She'd thought reporting it would turn the tide, expose Victoria's cruelty. Instead, the system bent backward to shield her, slapping Sasha with the blame. She grabbed her bag, heading off campus, her sneakers pounding the pavement. Her uncle's gym was an hour away by bus, a concrete sanctuary where she could think. She needed his advice, his strength. She texted him, "Coming over, trouble." He replied fast, "Doors open." The gym smelled of sweat and rubber, a familiar haven. Her uncle, Marcus, a broad-shouldered ex-Marine with a scar across his cheek, met her at the mats. She spilled it all, the books, the note, the suspension, her voice shaking with fury. He listened, his eyes narrowing, then tossed her a pair of gloves. "Hit the bag," he said. "Then we talk." She pounded it, her fists flying, each strike a release. Sweat dripped down her face, her muscles burning, until she stopped, panting. "They're coming for me," she said. "Harder every time." Marcus nodded, his voice low. "They smell blood. You showed them you can fight. Now they'll hit dirtier. Train harder, Sasha. Be ready." She nodded, peeling off the gloves, her resolve hardening. She'd survived the ashes, the threat, thought she'd get justice, but Crestwood wasn't fair. She caught the bus back, her mind sharp, ready to face whatever came next. Night fell as she reached her dorm, the campus quiet, the air thick with humidity. She'd barely unlocked her door when a shadow moved behind her. She spun, too late, as Jared's fist grazed her shoulder, shoving her inside. Bryce loomed next, his bulk filling the frame, while Lila's phone flashed, recording. "Thought you'd snitch?" Jared sneered, kicking her burned books across the floor. "Big mistake." Sasha's pulse raced, her training snapping into gear. She dodged Bryce's grab, her feet sliding into a stance, but the room was tight, no space to maneuver. "You're done," Bryce growled, lunging. She ducked, slipping past him, and bolted for the hall. Jared blocked her, his arm swinging, but she twisted, her elbow catching his ribs. He grunted, stumbling, and she broke free, sprinting toward the stairs. Lila's voice chased her, shrill and panicked. "Get her!" Sasha's sneakers pounded the tiles, her breath ragged, as she reached the common area. She spun, facing them, her back to a couch, her eyes locked on Bryce's hulking form. He charged, fists up, but Sasha moved like lightning, sidestepping and grabbing his wrist. She twisted, using his momentum, and sent him crashing into a table. Wood splintered, students gasping as they peeked from their rooms. Jared hesitated, clutching his side while Lila fumbled her phone, the red light still on. Sasha straightened, her chest heaving, her gaze cold. "Back off," she said, her voice a blade. They froze, Bryce groaning on the floor, Jared panting. She'd fought back again, slipped their trap, thought she'd won this round. But as she turned to leave, a dorm supervisor burst in, his face red. "Reynolds!" he barked. "You're in deep now." Sasha's stomach sank, her victory souring. Lila's video would spin this too. She knew it. She'd dodged their fists, shown them her strength, but the school would see another violent outburst. Victoria's shadow loomed larger, her dad's influence twisting every move Sasha made. She followed the supervisor, her hands flexing, her mind racing. She'd thought she could handle this, keep her cool, but they'd pushed her too far. "Hey, what would you do here?" Comment number 1 if you think Sasha should have knocked them out cold, or number 2 if she's smart to run. If you're raging at this unfairness, smash that like button and subscribe for the next twist. Ever had someone turn your fight against you? Tell us below. So how's Victoria gonna top this brutal payback? Sasha Reynolds stepped out of her dorm into the crisp morning air of Crestwood Academy, her sneakers crunching on the gravel path. The bruises from last night's ambush throbbed under her hoodie, a dull ache from Jared's shove and Bryce's near miss. She'd slipped their trap, left them scrambling, but the dorm supervisor's glare lingered in her mind. Another incident on her record, another mark against her name. She tugged her backpack straps, aiming for the library to catch up on missed work from her suspension. The campus buzzed with early chatter, students milling toward classes, their voices a low hum. She kept her head down, hoping to dodge the spotlight, but the air shifted, thick with something raw and angry. She crossed into the courtyard, a wide square ringed by oaks, when the noise hit her. A chant, ragged at first, then sharp and unified. "No trash at Crestwood! No trash at Crestwood!" Her pulse spiked, her eyes darting up. A crowd had formed, 30, maybe 40 kids, their faces twisted with hate, their fists pumping the air. Victoria Hensley stood at the center, her blonde hair gleaming, her navy blazer crisp as she raised her phone filming. Jared flanked her, his smirk wide, while Lila twirled her ponytail, egging the mob on. Bryce towered behind, his Letterman jacket a wall of muscle, his eyes locked on Sasha with a predator's gleam. "There she is," Victoria shouted, her voice slicing through the din. "The thug who doesn't belong." Sasha froze, her breath catching as the crowd turned, a wave of bodies closing in. "Get out!" a girl yelled, her voice shrill. "You're ruining our school," a boy added, his face red with fury. Racial slurs erupted, ugly and loud, clawing at her. "Go back to the ghetto. We don't want your kind here." She backed up, her sneakers scraping the stone, scanning for an exit, but they'd boxed her in, a ring of hate tightening fast. Victoria's grin widened, her eyes glinting with triumph. "See?" she called, her tone mocking. "Nobody wants you. Time to learn that." The mob surged, their chants a roar, and Sasha's training kicked in, her body coiling, ready to move. 3 boys broke from the pack, charging her with fists raised. The first, a lanky kid with a buzz cut, swung wild. Sasha ducked, her hips twisting, and shoved him into the second, a stocky guy with braces. They stumbled, cursing, but the third, a wiry kid with a scar on his cheek, grabbed her arm. She twisted free, her elbow catching his jaw, sending him reeling. The crowd gasped, a flicker of shock cutting through their rage, but it didn't stop them. She'd fought off 3, thought she'd turned the tide, her breath steady despite the pounding in her chest. "Back off!" she shouted, her voice raw, her stance wide. For a split second she believed she'd scared them, carved a path out. Then Bryce roared, his bulk crashing through the mob like a bulldozer. "You're done!" he bellowed, his fist aiming for her skull. Sasha dodged, her reflexes sharp, but the crowd pressed in, hands clawing at her hoodie, feet stomping her. Sneakers. She swung, her knuckles grazing a shoulder, but Bryce tackled her, his weight slamming her to the ground. Pain exploded up her spine, the gravel biting into her back as the mob descended. Kicks landed hard, boots thudding against her ribs, her legs, her arms. She curled up, protecting her head, her breath ragged, the world a blur of shouts and hate. "Teach her!" a girl screamed. "Make her leave!" a boy yelled, his voice thick with venom. Sasha's vision swam, blood trickling from her lip, but she didn't scream. She'd taken hits before, sparring with her uncle, but this was different. A storm of fury fueled by her skin, her presence. She'd thought she'd win, break their spirit with her fight. Instead, they'd turned it into this, a public beating, to prove their point. A sharp kick to her side stole her breath, her ribs creaking, and she bit down hard, swallowing the pain. The mob howled, their voices a wall of sound, Victoria's laughter cutting through it all, high and cruel. Sasha's hands clenched, her nails digging into her palms, but she couldn't get up, couldn't fight back, not against this many. A whistle shrieked, sharp and sudden, slicing through the chaos. Mr. Grayson, the history teacher, shoved through the crowd, his face red, his tie flapping. "Enough!" he barked, grabbing a kid by the collar and yanking him back. "Break it up now!" The mob hesitated, their kicks slowing, then scattered as he waved his arms, his voice booming. Bryce lingered, his boot hovering over Sasha, but Mr. Grayson glared, and he backed off, smirking. Victoria lowered her phone, her grin fading into something colder, more satisfied. Sasha rolled onto her knees, coughing, blood dripping onto the gravel, her body screaming with every move. Mr. Grayson knelt, his hand hovering like he didn't know what to do. "You okay?" he asked, his tone gruff but uncertain. Sasha nodded, wincing as she stood, her legs shaky but holding. Blood streaked her face, her hoodie torn, but her eyes, burned, unbroken. The crowd watched, some shifting uncomfortably, others glaring, their hate still simmering. She'd survived, taken their worst and stood up, thought she'd shown them something. Mr. Grayson helped her to the nurse's office, his grip firm, muttering about reckless kids. Sasha's mind raced, her ribs aching, but she felt a flicker of pride. She'd faced a mob and didn't crack. By afternoon, the dean's office loomed again, its wood-paneled walls closing in. Mr. Daniels sat behind his desk, his face grim. Mr. Hensley beside him, his suit crisp, his eyes cold. "Miss Reynolds," the dean started, his voice flat. We're in another fight. A dozen witnesses say you started it, swinging at students unprovoked." Sasha's jaw dropped, her bruises pulsing with every word. "That's a lie," she said, her voice hoarse. "They jumped me. I was defending myself." Mr. Hensley leaned forward, his tone smooth as oil. "We've got video. You attacked first. My daughter tried to stop it, but you escalated. You're a danger to this school." Sasha's blood ran cold, her hands trembling. Video. Of course. Victoria had filmed it, edited it, flipped the truth again. "That's not what happened," she said, her voice rising. "They surrounded me, kicked. Me check my bruises," Mr. Daniels sighed, rubbing his temples. "The evidence says otherwise. You're suspended again, 5 days this time. One more strike, and you're expelled. Mr. Hensley's pushing for it now." Sasha stared, the room spinning, the unfairness, choking her. She'd stood up, bloodied but alive, thought she'd turned the tide. Instead, they'd twisted it, branded her violent, dangerous, everything they wanted her to be. She stumbled out, her body aching, her mind reeling. The courtyard beating had been brutal, but this was worse, a knife in her back from the people who should have protected her. Victoria's dad had the school wrapped around his finger, and she'd played it perfectly. Sasha limped to her dorm, her breath shallow, her ribs screaming with every step. She'd faced the mob, taken their kicks, and stood tall. Thought she'd scared Victoria with her resilience. But as she sank onto her cot, her busted lips stinging, she saw it clear. Victoria wasn't scared. She was thrilled. That cold grin, that calculated glee, it meant more was coming. Sasha wiped the blood from her chin, her hands steady despite the pain. She'd trained for fights, not mobs. Not this twisted game where every move she made got flipped against her. She'd wanted to survive Crestwood, keep her scholarship, get out. But Victoria had turned it into a war, and the school was her battlefield. Sasha's eyes hardened, her resolve stealing through the haze of hurt. She'd taken their worst and stood up, bloodied but unbroken. They thought they'd won, thought they'd crushed her. They didn't know how wrong they were. She'd heal, she'd train, she'd come back. Victoria had lit the fuse, and Sasha wouldn't let it burn out. Sasha Reynolds limped back to Crestwood Academy after her 5-day suspension, her ribs still tender from the courtyard mob's kicks, her lips scabbed over but healing. The campus loomed under a gray Georgia sky, its red brick buildings casting long shadows across the gravel paths. She'd spent the break at her uncle's gym, pounding bags until her knuckles bled, turning pain into power. Her hoodie hung loose, hiding the bruises, but her eyes burned with a quiet fire. She'd survived Victoria Hensley's latest attack, stood up bloodied but unbroken, thought she'd scared them into backing off. She was wrong. The whispers hit her as soon as she stepped onto the quad, sharper now, laced with something new. "She's back," a girl muttered. "Thought they'd kicked her out," a boy sneered. Sasha kept her head down, aiming for her dorm, but the air felt heavy, primed for a storm. She'd barely made it to her locker when a voice cut through. The hum. "Hey, Sasha, wait up." She turned, wary, and saw Emma Carter jogging toward her, a white girl with freckles and a shy smile. Emma's blonde curls bounced, her blazer slightly askew, her vibe softer than the polished shark Sasha usually dodged. "I saw what happened," Emma said, her voice low, her green eyes flicking around. "The mob, the video, all of it. It's messed up. I hate how Victoria runs this place." Sasha's guard stayed up, her hands tightening on her backpack straps. She'd learned trust was a luxury she couldn't afford here. "Yeah," she said, her tone flat. "It's been a ride." Emma stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I want to help. I've got dirt on Victoria, stuff she doesn't want out. We could take her down together." Sasha's pulse ticked up, suspicion warring with a flicker of hope. She'd been alone in this fight, the school turning a blind eye every time. An ally, even a risky one, could shift the game. "What kind of dirt?" she asked, her eyes narrowing. Emma grinned, a spark of mischief in her gaze. "Texts, photos, proof she's behind everything. Meet me after class in the library, I'll show you." Sasha hesitated, then nodded. "Okay, but no tricks." Emma's smile widened. "Promise." The day dragged, Sasha's mind churning through English and math, her ribs aching with every breath. She kept seeing Victoria's cold grin, the mob's boots, the dean's shrug. Emma's offer gnawed at her, a lifeline in a sea of hate. By afternoon, she slipped into the library, its shelves towering with dusty books, the air cool and quiet. Emma waited at a back table, a stack of papers in front of her, her phone glowing. "Here," she said, sliding a photo across. It showed Victoria and Bryce torching something, Sasha's burned textbooks maybe, their faces smug. "She bragged about it," Emma said. "I've got more. She's scared of you, you know." Sasha's chest tightened, a rush of vindication mixing with caution. "Scared?" she asked, her voice low. Emma nodded. "You didn't break. She's obsessed with crushing you." Sasha leaned back, her mind racing. She'd thought she could ride this out, survive Crestwood's racism with silence. But Victoria wouldn't stop, and this could be her shot. "How do we use it?" she asked. Emma's eyes lit up. "Expose her. I'll leak it, say I found it. But I need something from you first. Proof you're not what they say." Sasha frowned, her guard creeping back. "Like what?" Emma shrugged, casual. "Show me how you fight. I heard you're good. It'll convince people you're not the bad guy." Sasha's gut twisted, but Emma's earnest look softened her. She'd kept her skills under wraps, a weapon for emergencies. But this felt different. She nodded, leading Emma to a quiet corner of the library, away from prying eyes. "Watch," she said, dropping her bag. She moved through a quick combo, her fists slicing the air, her feet pivoting with precision. A jab, a hook, a spin kick, each move fluid, controlled, years of her uncle's training in every snap. Emma's jaw dropped, her phone slipping from her hand. "Holy crap," she breathed. "You're unreal." Sasha stopped, breathing hard, a flicker of pride warming her chest. She'd trusted Emma, thought she'd found an ally to turn the tide. That night, Sasha crashed on her cot, her mind buzzing with plans. Emma's evidence, her fight, it could flip everything. She'd expose Victoria, clear her name, maybe even stay at Crestwood. She drifted off, thinking she'd won a piece of this war. But morning shattered that hope. Her phone buzzed at dawn, a flood of notifications lighting up the screen. She opened the group chat, her stomach dropping. A video looped, shaky but clear. Sasha in the library, throwing punches. Her face grim, her moves lethal. No context, just her looking like a thug itching for a fight. The caption read, "Proof she's dangerous. Get her out." Comments piled up, vicious and fast. "She's a psycho. No wonder she attacked Bryce." Typical hood rat. Sasha's blood ran cold, her hands shaking as she scrolled. Emma had recorded her, betrayed her, handed Victoria the perfect weapon. She'd thought she'd gained an ally, turned the tables. Instead, she'd walked into a trap. The dorm door rattled with a knock, the supervisor barking her name. "Reynolds, Dean's office now." She stumbled out, her head spinning, the campus a blur as she trudged to Mr. Daniels' office. He sat with Mr. Hensley again, his suit sharper than ever, his eyes glinting with victory. "This video," the dean said, holding up his phone, "shows you practicing violence. You're a threat. We're investigating." Sasha's voice shook, rage boiling over. "That's not what it is. Someone set me up. I was showing a friend." Mr. Hensley smirked, leaning forward. "A friend who says you bragged about hurting people." Emma Carter came forward, said she's scared of you. Sasha's knees buckled, the betrayal a punch to her gut. "She lied," she said, her voice cracking. "She asked me to show her." The dean sighed, dismissive. "No proof. You're suspended again, pending review. One more step, and you're gone." Sasha stared, the room closing in, her ally's knife twisting deeper than the mob's kicks. She staggered back to her dorm, her mind reeling when Emma appeared, her face pale, her eyes darting. "Sasha, I'm sorry," she whispered, stepping close. "Victoria made me. She threatened my scholarship. I didn't mean it." Sasha's fists clenched, her breath short. "You sold me out," she said, her voice low, deadly. Emma nodded, tears welling. "I'll fix it. I'll tell the truth." Sasha wanted to believe her, thought she'd get a second chance to fight back. But as Emma turned away, a glint of steel flashed in Lila's hand, stepping from the shadows. "Not so." "Fast!" Lila hissed, lunging with a knife. Sasha reacted, her training snapping into place. She sidestepped, grabbing Lila's wrist, twisting until the blade clattered to the ground. Lila yelped, stumbling back, but Sasha didn't stop, shoving her against the wall, her forearm pinning her throat. "Tell Victoria I'm done playing," she growled, her eyes blazing. Lila nodded, gasping, and Sasha let go, stepping back as police sirens wailed in the distance. She dodged the knife, thought she'd scared them off again. But blue lights flashed outside, cops storming in. "Hands up, Reynolds!" one shouted, cuffs glinting. Sasha froze, her victory crumbling. Emma's wide eyes met hers, a silent apology, but it was too late. The dorm hall spun, Sasha's hands rising slow, her heart pounding. She'd trusted Emma, fought off Lila, thought she'd turned the tide. But as the cuffs clicked around her wrists, she saw the truth. Victoria's crew had trashed her room, planted drugs in her bag, framed her perfect. The cops hauled her out, students gawking, whispers buzzing. She's a dealer now? Knew? She was trouble. Sasha's head throbbed, her ribs aching, isolation swallowing her whole. She'd slipped their trap, shown her strength, but they'd flipped it again. Deeper, darker. Victoria wasn't just winning. She was rewriting Sasha's life, and the next move would be worse. Sasha Reynolds sat in the back of a police cruiser, her wrists chafed by cold steel cuffs, the red and blue lights pulsing through Crestwood Academy's campus like a heartbeat. Her breath fogged the window, her ribs aching from the mob's kicks, her mind replaying Lila's knife glinting in the dorm hall. She'd dodged it, pinned Lila, thought she'd scared Victoria's crew off with a taste of her strength. But the drugs in her bag, the trashed room, it was a setup she hadn't seen coming. The cop in the driver's seat, a burly guy with a buzz cut, muttered into his radio, his eyes flicking to her in the rear view. "Caught her red-handed," he said, his voice gruff. Sasha's stomach twisted, her voice low but steady. "I didn't do it. It's a frame-up," he snorted, not even turning. "Tell it to the judge, kid." The station was a blur of fluorescent lights and stale coffee, the walls plastered with wanted posters. Sasha stood in a holding room, her sneakers scuffing the cracked tile, as a lawyer in a cheap suit shuffled in. "You're lucky," he said, flipping through papers. "Technicality, no warrant for the dorm search. You're out for now, but they're digging." Sasha's shoulders eased, a flicker of relief cutting through the haze. She'd thought she was done, locked up for good. The cuffs came off, her wrists red but free, and her Uncle Marcus picked her up, his truck rumbling through the Georgia. "They're playing dirty," he said, his scarred hands tight on the wheel. "You gotta watch every step." She nodded, her jaw clenched, thinking she'd escaped the worst. Back at Crestwood, the campus loomed darker, the oaks whispering in the wind. Sasha slipped into her dorm, her room still a mess from the raid, her few belongings scattered like wreckage. She'd dodged jail, thought she'd bought time to fight back. But the next morning, a letter slid under her door, crisp and official, stamped with the school's crest. Her heart sank as she tore it open. A restraining order, signed by Mr. Hensley, Victoria's dad. Sasha Reynolds is prohibited from approaching Victoria Hensley or her associates within 100 yards, citing repeated violent incidents. Her hands shook, rage boiling up. Violent incidents? She'd been the one attacked, ambushed, framed, and now this? She stormed to the dean's office, her sneakers pounding the hall, the paper crumpled in her fist. Mr. Daniels sat behind his desk, his face pinched, Mr. Hensley beside him, his suit pristine, his smirk barely hidden. "What is this?" Sasha demanded, slamming the letter down. "I didn't do anything to her." Mr. Hensley leaned forward, his voice smooth as glass. "We've got evidence. Videos. Witnesses. You're a threat to my daughter's safety. This is for everyone's good." Sasha's chest burned, her voice rising. "Your daughter's the one coming after me. The mob, the drugs, it's all her." The dean sighed, rubbing his temples. "Calm down, Miss Reynolds. The order stands. Break it, and you're arrested." Sasha's head spun, the walls closing in. She thought she'd slipped their legal trap, walked free from the station. But this was tighter, a noose she couldn't dodge. She left the office, her breath shallow, the campus a blur of hostile stares. Kids whispered as she passed, their phones out, their eyes cold. "She's psycho," one said. "Heard she's got a record now," another added. The restraining order was a scarlet letter, marking her as the villain, untouchable. She kept her distance, sticking to the edges, thinking she'd ride it out. But Victoria wasn't done twisting the knife. By afternoon, Sasha headed to the library, her backpack heavy with borrowed books, when Jared stepped into her path, his preppy sweater pristine, his grin wide. "Hey, trash," he said, loud enough for the quad to hear. "Miss me?" Sasha froze, her pulse spiking, the restraining order flashing in her mind. She was 50 yards from him, too close. "Back off," she said, her voice low, stepping away. He laughed, closing the gap, his hands in his pockets. "What's wrong? Scared of a little chat?" She turned, walking fast. But he followed, his voice taunting. "Run all you want. You're done here." She ducked into a side path, her heart pounding, thinking she'd escaped the bait. She'd barely caught her breath when sirens wailed, blue lights flashing across the lawn. Cops swarmed, their boots thudding, and Sasha's stomach dropped. "Hands up, Reynolds," one barked, his gun drawn. She complied, her arms trembling, confusion crashing over her. "What's this?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear. The buzz-cut cop from before smirked, holding up a baggie. "Violation. You were near Jared Hensley, and look what we found in your bag." Sasha's eyes widened, her breath hitching. A gun, small and black, glinted in his hand. "That's not mine," she said, her voice rising. "You planted it." He shrugged, cuffing her again. "Sure, kid. Tell it to booking." The station was colder this time, the holding cell a slab of concrete and steel. Sasha sat, her head in her hands, the cuffs off, but the weight still there. They'd staged it, lured her into breaking the order, planted the gun to seal it. She'd thought she'd dodged their legal trap, walked free on a technicality. But this was deeper, a setup she couldn't fight from a cell. Marcus bailed her. Out hours later, his truck silent as they drove. "They're burying you," he said, his voice low. "Hensley's got pull. School's expelling you now." Sasha's chest tightened, her scholarship, her future slipping away. "I didn't do it," she whispered. He nodded, his grip tightening. "I know. We'll fight." Back at the dorm, Sasha packed her few things, her hands steady despite the chaos. The expulsion letter had come fast, signed by the dean, citing repeated incidents endangering student safety. She'd dodged jail again, thought she'd hold on to Crestwood. But Victoria's dad had crushed that, his vendetta personal now. She slung her bag over her shoulder, her ribs aching, her mind racing. She'd survived the mob, the knife, the drugs, thought she'd scared them with her fight. But as she stepped into the night, she saw Victoria watching from a window, her grin cold, her eyes gleaming. This wasn't over. It was war, and Sasha was out of moves. She crashed at Marcus's. Gym, the mat's her bed. The hum of the city outside a dull roar. She'd lost everything, her chance at a diploma, her escape from Detroit. Victoria had turned her strength into a curse, her survival into a crime. But as Sasha lay there, her bruises pulsing, her resolve hardened. She'd thought she'd won. A round slipped their traps with skill. Instead, they'd flipped it, pushed her to the edge. She punched the mat, her knuckles stinging, rage fueling her. They thought they'd broken her, expelled her, erased her. They didn't know what she'd do next. Hey, what's your take? Comment number 1 if you think Sasha's been screwed by the system, or number 2 if she should have seen Emma's betrayal coming. If you're boiling at this injustice, smash that like button and subscribe for the next blow. Ever had someone frame you to win? Drop your story below. So, how's Sasha gonna claw her way back from this abyss? Sasha Reynolds crouched in the shadows of Crestwood Academy's admin building, her breath fogging in the cool night air, her sneakers silent on the damp grass. Her ribs ached from the mob's kicks, her wrists still raw from cuffs, but her eyes burned with a fierce determination. She'd been expelled, her scholarship torched by Victoria Hensley's frame-up, the gun in her bag the final nail. She'd crashed at her Uncle Marcus's gym for days, training until her muscles screamed, plotting her comeback. She wasn't done. She'd hack the school system, find proof of Victoria's lies, broadcast it to the world. She'd clear. Her name thought she could turn this war around. The campus slept, its red brick walls dark under a sliver of moon. But her pulse thumped loud in her ears. She'd borrowed a burner laptop from Marcus, a clunky thing with cracked keys, and spent hours learning to crack passwords from a sketchy online forum. Now she slipped through a side door she'd scoped out, left unlocked by a careless janitor. The hall smelled of bleach and old paper, its silence heavy as she crept to the IT room. Her hoodie hung loose, hiding the bruises, her backpack light with just the essentials. She jimmied the lock with a bent paperclip, her hand steady despite the tremor in her chest, and slid inside. The room hummed with servers, their lights blinking like eyes, and she plugged in, her fingers flying over the keys. She'd thought this was her shot, her way back. The system was a maze, but she'd memorized the admin login from a discarded memo she'd found weeks ago. She typed it in, holding her breath, and the screen flashed green. Access granted. She dug through files, her eyes scanning fast, hunting for anything. Emails, security footage, proof Victoria had orchestrated the mob, the drugs, the gun. Her heart leapt as she found a folder labeled Incident Reports, buried deep. Inside, a video file, the courtyard beating, unedited, showing the mob's attack, Victoria's grin, Bryce's tackle. Another file, an email from Mr. Hensley to the dean. Handle Reynolds. She's a liability. Sasha's chest tightened, a rush of vindication flooding her. She'd found it, thought she'd won. She copied the files to a USB, her hands shaking with adrenaline, and logged into the school's announcement system. She'd broadcast it live, let every student see the truth. She hit play, the video blasting through every speaker, every screen on campus. Her voice crackled over it, raw and steady. This is what they did. This is who they protect. Dorm. Lights flickered on, shouts echoing as kids stumbled out, phones up, recording. Sasha's pulse raced, her lips curling into a grim smile. She'd done it, exposed them, thought she'd turned the tide. She slipped out, heading for the parking lot, her sneakers pounding the pavement, freedom so close she could taste it. But as she rounded the gym, a shadow loomed, massive and silent. A man, not a student, stepped from the dark, his face hidden under a hood, his fists meaty and scarred. "Hensley says hi," he growled, his voice a low rumble. Sasha's stomach dropped, her training snapping in, but he was fast. A hired thug, not a clumsy kid. He swung, his fist grazing her jaw as she dodged, pain flaring bright. She ducked, aiming a kick at his knee, but he caught her leg, twisting hard. She hit the asphalt, gravel biting her palms, her breath knocked out. She'd thought she'd escaped, won this round. But he was on her, relentless. He grabbed her hoodie, yanking her up, and slammed her against a car hood. Metal dented under her back, her ribs screaming as he drove a knee into her gut. She gasped, stars bursting in her vision, but swung wild, her knuckles clipping his chin. He grunted, unfazed, and smashed her face into the hood, blood gushing from her nose. "Should have stayed gone," he snarled, his fist crashing into her temple. The world tilted, her legs buckling, and she crumpled, the USB slipping from her pocket, clattering away. She'd broadcast the truth, thought she'd scared them into retreat. But this was Victoria's answer, a hired blade to break her for good. Sasha clawed at the ground, her fingers scraping asphalt, her body a map of pain. The thug loomed, his boot rising, but headlights flashed, a car screeching into the lot. He bolted, vanishing into the oaks, leaving her sprawled, blood pooling under her cheek. She'd thought she'd won, turned their lies inside out. Instead, she'd poked a bear, and it bit back hard. A campus guard found her, his flashlight blinding, his voice sharp. "What the hell happened?" She mumbled, incoherent, her head spinning as he called for help. Sirens wailed, an ambulance roaring in, and she faded out, the USB gone. Her victory, stolen. She woke in a hospital bed, the beep of machines drilling into her skull, her face swollen, her nose bandaged, tubes snaked from her arm, the room sterile and white, a stark contrast to the blood and dirt of the lot. Marcus sat beside her, his scarred face grim, his hands clenched. "You're lucky," he said, his voice rough. Cracked ribs, concussion, busted nose, could have been worse. Sasha's throat burned, her words slurring. "They took it. The proof." He nodded, his jaw tight. "Hensley shut it down. Systems wiped. School's calling it a prank gone wrong. You're still expelled." Sasha's chest caved, her breath shallow, pain lancing through her. She'd hacked in, broadcast the truth, thought she'd cleared her name. Instead, Victoria's dad had crushed it, sent a thug to crush her, left her broken in a bed with nothing to show. Her hands flexed, weak but restless, rage simmering under the hurt. She'd pushed back, taken the fight to them, and they'd hit harder, meaner. The nurse bustled in, her voice clipped. "Rest up, you're out tomorrow." Sasha stared at the ceiling, her mind a fog of defeat. She'd lost everything, her scholarship, her future, her fight. Thought she'd scared Victoria into retreat. Marcus leaned close, his voice a growl. "They think they've won. They're wrong. Heal up, Sasha. We're not done." She nodded, her eyes hardening through the haze. She'd hit rock bottom, her body wrecked, her plan ashes. But as the machines beeped, her resolve flickered, a ember refusing to die. Victoria gloated somewhere, her cold grin flashing in Sasha's mind, her dad's power untouchable. They'd thought they'd broken her, left her for dead in that lot. They didn't know what she'd trained for, what she'd survived. She'd thought she'd turned the tide, exposed their rot. Instead, she'd woken a beast, and it nearly killed her. She closed her eyes, pain pulsing, but her fists clenched under the sheets. They'd see her again. The hospital room faded as she drifted, her mind replaying the thug's fists, the USB slipping away. She'd been so close, thought she'd won this war with brains and guts. But Crestwood wasn't a ring, wasn't fair. It was a machine, oiled with money and hate, grinding her down every time she stood up. She'd lost her shot at a diploma, her escape from Detroit. Her name smeared beyond repair. Victoria had turned her strength into a noose, her fight into a fall. But as sleep took her, Sasha's jaw tightened, her spirit unbowed. They'd pushed her to the edge, thought they'd buried her. They didn't know how deep her fire burned, how far she'd crawl to fight back. Sasha Reynolds stood in the cramped bathroom of her Uncle Marcus's gym, her reflection staring back from a cracked mirror. Her nose was still taped from the thug's beating, her ribs wrapped tight under a fresh hoodie, but her eyes gleamed with a hard, unyielding light. She'd spent weeks recovering, training through the pain, her fists pounding bags until her knuckles split, her body a weapon forged anew. Crestwood had expelled her, stripped her scholarship, left her for dead in that parking lot. She'd thought she'd cleared her name with the hacked broadcast, turned the tide against Victoria Hensley. Instead, she'd lost everything, her proof stolen, her fight flipped into defeat. But she wasn't done. Tonight she'd crash their precious school event, face Victoria's crew head-on, reclaim her dignity. She'd show them she couldn't be broken. Marcus handed her a black cap, his scarred face grim. "Spring galas tonight," he said, his voice low. "Big shot students all there. You sure about this?" Sasha nodded, tucking her braids under the cap, her sneakers scuffing the concrete floor. "They think I'm gone. I'll hit 'em where it hurts." He sighed, tossing her a burner phone. "In and out, Sasha. No hero stuff." She smirked, pocketing it, her heart thumping with a mix of fear and fire. She'd infiltrate the gala, take down Jared and Lila, make them feel her strength. She'd thought she'd lost this war, but she'd claw her way back, one punch at a time. The bus ride to Crestwood was a blur, the Georgia night thick with humidity, the campus glowing under strings of lights. The gala sprawled across the main hall, a glittering mess of tuxedos and gowns, laughter spilling out into the quad. Sasha slipped off the bus, her cap low, her hoodie blending into the shadows. She'd scoped the layout days ago, sneaking through online photos, mapping every exit. The service entrance yawned open, a caterer's oversight, and she darted in, her sneakers silent on the tiled floor. The kitchen buzzed with staff, trays clattering, but she moved fast, slipping into the hall's back corridors, her breath steady despite the ache in her ribs. The gala roared ahead, a sea of polished faces and clinking glasses, the air thick with perfume and privilege. Sasha peeked from a side door, her eyes scanning the crowd. Victoria stood near the stage, her blonde hair a crown, her white dress shimmering, her grin cold as she chatted with her dad. Jared lounged by a table, his preppy sweater swapped for a suit, his smirk wide as he flirted with a girl. Lila twirled nearby, her gown sparkling, her phone up, snapping pics. Bryce loomed at the bar, his bulk dwarfing the crowd, his Letterman jacket traded for a blazer. Sasha's hands flexed, her training humming in her veins. She'd take them down, thought she'd reclaim her pride right here. She waited, her cap shadowing her face until Jared broke off, heading for a hallway alone. She followed, her steps light, her pulse a drumbeat. He turned a corner, and she struck, her fist slamming into his gut, doubling him over with a gasp. "Remember me?" she hissed, grabbing his collar, shoving him against the wall. His eyes widened, panic flashing as he clawed at her arms. "You're dead," he choked, but she twisted his wrist, dropping him to his knees, her knee pinning his chest. "Not yet," she said, her voice a blade, her strength surging. She'd thought this was it, her comeback starting with his fall. Footsteps echoed sharp and fast, and Lila rounded the corner, her gown swishing, her scream piercing the hall. "Help!" she shrieked, fumbling her phone. But Sasha was on her, snatching the device, smashing it under her heel. Lila swung, her nails raking Sasha's cheek, but Sasha ducked, grabbing her arm, flipping her onto the tile with a thud. Lila gasped, her gown tangling, her eyes wide with shock. "You're crazy!" she spat, scrambling back, but Sasha towered over her, her breath ragged, her fists clenched. "You started this," she said, her voice low, deadly. She'd taken down two, thought she'd turned the night into her win, her dignity clawing back with every hit. The hall trembled with noise, the gala's hum shifting as shouts rose. Sasha spun, her cap slipping, her heart pounding. Bryce charged. From the main room, his bulk a freight train, his roar shaking the walls. "You're mine," he bellowed, his fists swinging, but Sasha dodged, her feet pivoting, her training alive. She jabbed his ribs, danced back, her moves fluid despite the ache in her side. He swung again, wild, and she ducked, slamming her elbow into his jaw, staggering him. The crowd spilled in, phones up, gasps rippling as she fought, her cap falling, her face bare. She'd thought she'd finish this, show them all, reclaim her ground. But then a crack split the air, wood splintering as Bryce grabbed a bat from a display case, his eyes blazing with hate. "Enough," he roared, swinging hard. Sasha twisted, the bat grazing her shoulder, pain flaring hot. But he swung again, faster, catching her hip. She stumbled, her legs buckling, and he struck, the bat slamming her ribs, cracking the air from her lungs. She hit the floor, gravel from her sneakers scattering, her vision swimming as the crowd cheered, their voices a wall of glee. "Get her!" a girl shouted. "Finish it!" a boy yelled, racial slurs lacing their cries, raw and vicious. She'd thought she'd won, taken them down, turned their night into hers. Bryce loomed, the bat raised, his grin feral, but Sasha rolled, her hands clawing the tile, her body screaming. She kicked his shin, buying a breath, but he swung low, the bat smashing her knee, a sick crunch echoing. Pain exploded, white hot, and she collapsed, her fight draining fast. Victoria stepped forward, her white dress pristine, her phone up, filming, her laugh high and cruel. "Look at her," she said, her voice carrying over the cheers. The thug finally falls. Sasha's blood smeared the floor, her breath shallow, her strength fading. She'd infiltrated, fought back, thought she'd reclaimed her dignity, scared them with her fire. The crowd pressed in, their phones a forest of lights, their hate a tidal wave. Sasha's hands twitched, her mind fogging, but she glared up, her eyes locked on Victoria's, unbroken even now. She'd taken down Jared, flipped Lila, staggered Bryce, thought she'd turned this gala into her stand. But they'd flipped it, turned her comeback into a spectacle, a monster for their delight. Security shoved through, their boots thudding, yelling for order, but Bryce swung once more, the bat grazing her skull, stars bursting in her sight. She crumpled, her body a heap, her fight snuffed out, the crowd's roar swallowing her whole. Sasha's world dimmed, her cheek pressed to the cold tile, blood pooling under her face. She'd crashed their night, fought with everything, thought she'd shown them her strength, her worth. Instead, they'd crushed her, turned her defiance into their victory, her pain, their show. Victoria's heels clicked closer, her voice, a whisper over the din. "You should have stayed down," she said, her grin a blade in Sasha's gut. The security guard hauled Bryce back, his bat clattering away, but the damage was done. Sasha's eyes fluttered, her breath a rasp, her comeback, a ruin. She'd thought she'd scared them, turned the tide. They'd turned it back, harder, meaner. The hall spun, voices blurring as medics rushed in, their hands rough, their words distant. Sasha's body screamed, her knee throbbing, her ribs cracked. Anew, but her mind clung to one thing, Victoria's gloat, her crew's cheers. She'd infiltrated, fought, thought she'd won this round, reclaimed her pride. But as they lifted her onto a stretcher, her vision fading, she saw the truth. They'd let her rise just to drop her harder, frame her as the beast they'd always claimed. She'd lost again, her fight flipped into their triumph, her dignity bleeding out on the gala floor. But even as darkness took her, her fist twitched, her fire flickering. They thought they'd finished her. They were wrong. Sasha Reynolds leaned against the rusted fence outside Crestwood Academy's gym, her breath shallow, her body a map of pain from the gala beating weeks ago. Her knee throbbed under a brace, her ribs ached with every move, but her eyes burned, with a cold, unyielding fury. She'd trained at Marcus's gym since the hospital, her fists smashing bags until her knuckles bled, her spirit forged anew in sweat and grit. Victoria Hensley had crushed her comeback, turned her gala fight into a public fall, left her broken on that polished floor. But Sasha wasn't done. Tonight she'd lure Victoria to the gym, hack the school's live stream, expose her corruption, live. She'd end this war. Thought she'd reclaim her life with one last stand. Marcus had rigged a burner phone with a hotspot, his scarred hand steady as he'd handed it over. "Gym's empty after hours," he'd said, his voice rough. "Get in, get out, I'll watch the feed." Sasha nodded, her cap low, her hoodie dark, her sneakers scuffing the gravel as she slipped through a side door she'd jimmied earlier. The gym smelled of sweat and rubber, its lights dim, the mats a patchwork of shadows. She'd sent Victoria a taunt through a fake account. "Meet me, gym, midnight, or I leak everything." She'd counted on Victoria's pride, her need to crush Sasha herself. She'd thought this trap would flip the game, turn their hate into her victory. She set up fast, her laptop humming on a bench, her fingers flying over the keys. She'd cracked the school system before, knew its weak spots, and hacked the live stream with a script she'd pieced together from dark web tutorials. The screen flickered, her burner phone syncing, ready to broadcast to every dorm, every phone on campus. She hid the setup under a towel, her heart pounding, and waited, her stance loose despite the ache in her knee. The clock ticked past midnight, the gym silent, until footsteps echoed, sharp and deliberate. Victoria strutted in, her blonde hair loose, her jacket crisp, her grin cold as ice. Bryce loomed behind, his bulk a wall, Jared and Lila flanking him, their eyes glinting with malice. "Thought you'd crawl back," Victoria said, her voice a taunt, her phone up filming. "You never learn." Sasha straightened, her cap shadowing her face, her voice steady. "I'm done running. You're done lying." Victoria laughed, high and cruel, stepping closer. "You're nothing. A thug who can't let go." Sasha's hands flexed, her training alive. But she held back, waiting. The live stream hummed, silent for now, her trap set. She thought this was it, her moment to flip their power, expose their rot live. Bryce cracked his knuckles, his grin wide. "Let's finish her," he growled, charging, his fists swinging like hammers. Sasha dodged, her knees screaming, but her feet pivoted, her body fluid despite the pain. She ducked Bryce's punch, her elbow slamming his ribs, staggering him with a grunt. Jared lunged next, his suit jacket flapping, his fist aiming for her jaw. She twisted, grabbing his arm, flipping him onto the mat with a thud, his breath whooshing. "Out!" Lila shrieked, her heels clicking as she swung a purse, but Sasha sidestepped, snatching it, tossing it aside. "Stay down," she said, her voice a blade, her eyes locked on Victoria, who filmed it all, her grin faltering. Sasha thought she'd turn this fight into her win, show them her strength unbroken. The gym trembled, the mats slick with sweat. As Bryce roared back, his bulk relentless. Sasha danced away, her knee buckling, but she jabbed his nose, blood spraying, his howl echoing. Jared scrambled up, his face red, and swung wild, but she ducked, sweeping his legs, dropping him again. Lila grabbed a dumbbell, her arms shaking, and hurled it, grazing Sasha's shoulder, pain flaring hot. Sasha stumbled, her breath ragged, but straightened, her fists up, her gaze fierce. She'd taken them down, thought she'd scared them, turned their attack into her stand. Victoria's phone wavered, her eyes narrowing, sensing the shift. Sasha lunged for the bench, ripping the towel off her laptop, hitting the live stream key. The screen blazed, the gym's speakers crackling as her voice boomed. "This is Victoria Hensley," she said, panting, pointing at her. "She framed me, burned my books, sent a mob, planted drugs, a gun. Here's proof." The hacked files played, the courtyard video unedited, Mr. Hensley's email flashing, Victoria's grin caught in the act. Dorms lit up outside, shouts rising. As students watched, phones buzzing campus-wide. Sasha's chest heaved, her lips curling, thinking she'd won, exposed them live, turned their lies inside out. Victoria's face paled, her phone dropping, but Bryce roared, charging blind, his fists swinging. Sasha dodged, her knee buckling, and flipped him over her hip, his bulk crashing into a rack, weights clattering. Jared tackled her, his arms locking. Her waist, but she twisted, slamming her elbow into his temple, dropping him limp. Lila froze, her eyes wide, backing away as Sasha stood, blood trickling from her lip, her stance unbowed. The crowd outside grew, their voices a tide, turning on Victoria, phones up, filming her fall. Sasha thought this was her victory, her strength flipping their power, ending this war. But then the gym doors burst open, wood splintering as Mr. Hensley stormed in, his suit crisp, his face red, cops behind him, guns drawn. "Arrest her!" he barked, pointing at Sasha. "She assaulted my daughter." Sasha's stomach dropped, her breath hitching as Victoria smirked, stepping back, her panic gone. "She attacked us," she said, her voice shaking, fake tears welling. The cops swarmed, their boots thudding, shouting, "Hands up, Reynolds!" Sasha froze, her hands rising slow, confusion crashing over her. She'd exposed them, turned the tide, thought the crowd's shift would save her. A cop grabbed her, twisting her arms, cuffs clicking tight, her knees screaming as he shoved her down. "You're under arrest," he growled, his grip bruising. Sasha's voice rasped, "Check the feed. It's all there." But Mr. Hensley snatched her laptop, smashing it under his heel, the screen shattering, the live stream cutting to static. The crowd outside gasped, their phones wavering, but the cops hauled her up, dragging her toward the door. She'd thought she'd won, flipped their lies live, scared them with the truth. Instead, Mr. Hensley flipped it back, his power crushing her proof, her fight. Sasha struggled, her body aching, her eyes locked on Victoria's grin, cold and victorious. "You lose," Victoria mouthed, her dad barking orders, the cops obeying like dogs. But the crowd's shouts shifted, angry now. "Let her go. We saw it." Phones still rolled, snippets of the feed saved, spreading fast. Sasha's evidence hit, Mr. Hensley's corruption bare, his panic flickering as he yelled, "Shut it down!" She dodged their fists, turned their attack into her stand, thought she'd lost it all. But as they dragged her out, blue lights, flashing, her head high, the crowd turned, their voices a roar against Victoria's reign. The gym faded, Sasha's sneakers scraping the gravel, her breath shallow but steady. She'd lured them, fought them, exposed them live, thought she'd claimed victory. The cops shoved her into a cruiser, Mr. Hensley's glare burning through the glass. Victoria's smirk a shadow beside him. Her laptop was smashed, her proof fractured, but the crowd's tide shifted, their phones a lifeline she hadn't planned. She'd flipped the fight, turned their hate into her weapon, thought she'd scared them into retreat. They'd cuffed, her flipped it back, but the truth was out, raw and loud. She'd lost the battle, thought she'd lost the war. But as the car rolled, her fists clenched, her fire flared. This wasn't the end. Sasha Reynolds' journey in Bullies' pick on the wrong new black girl, not knowing she's a brutal fighter, is a raw, unflinching look at the cost of standing up to systemic hate. The biggest lesson here is resilience. Sasha faced relentless racism, from public humiliation to brutal beatings, yet her spirit never broke. She turned pain into power, training her body and mind to fight back, showing us that strength isn't just in fists, but in refusing to bow. Another takeaway is the ugly truth of power dynamics. Victoria Hensley and her dad wielded wealth and influence to twist justice, framing Sasha at every turn, a stark reminder that systems often protect the privileged, not the truth. But Sasha's story also teaches us about exposure's double edge. Her hacked livestream flipped the script, revealing their corruption, yet it wasn't enough to save her immediately, proving change is a slog, not a sprint. Finally, the ending's twist with Victoria's chilling vow hammers home that battles against hate don't end cleanly, they evolve. Sasha's smirk in the face of that threat? That's courage, the kind we all need when the fight gets personal. So what's the takeaway for us? It's about finding your fire, pushing back when the world pushes you down, and knowing every punch counts even if the war drags on. How would you handle Sasha's fight? Comment below if you'd fight like her or find another way. Hit like if her grit inspires you, and subscribe for more tales of defiance against all odds. Share this if you believe exposing injustice matters. Thanks for joining us on this wild ride. We're grateful for every one of you standing with us. Here's to unbreakable spirits and fearless hearts. May you carry that strength into your own battles.